Good afternoon, World History, talking about Unit 5.5 today, the Enlightenment in Europe. We've made a strong transition from the Middle Ages to talking about the Protestant Reformation and how individuals began to recognize they didn't need the church to tell them how to think, that they had thoughts, they had ideas, and that they could explore those ideas. And a famous quote during this particular time was basically this, and it teaches us that if there's something you know, then communicate it. If there's something you don't know, then search for it. And that is the essence of the Enlightenment. And the Enlightenment is this new intellectual movement that is stressing reason and allowing individuals the opportunity, the freedom to solve problems, to think about old ideas in new ways. And it begins in the 1600s and will really reach its peak in the 1700s. And there are five key concepts that form the core of the beliefs during the Enlightenment. And the first one is this: it's reason. And the thinkers believed that you could find the truth through reason and logic. That if you think about something, if you apply critical thinking skills, if you really study this particular topic or question, then you can find the answer to it. You don't need somebody to tell you something, but you have the ability to find these things out on your own. They also looked at nature, and they believed that what was natural was good and was reasonable, that the things of this earth was not intended to be sinful or harmful, but that the things of this earth were good, and it was reasonable to be a part of these things. The third thing, of course, is happiness, that they rejected the medieval ages notion that the joy would only come in the future, like in heaven, but that you could enjoy happiness here on earth. And you should actually try to find that. You should go out and be happy people. They also believed in progress, that you had the opportunity to move forward with things, to progress, to study, that humanity could improve, that we don't have to be stuck where we are, but that we can use the resources we've been given and we can make things better. We can make this world a better place, which is where you start seeing inventions and medicines and all of these things designed to help people live longer. And finally, the philosophers, these Enlightenment thinkers, will call for liberties that the English people had won in the Glorious Revolution. This is that idea of life, liberty, the pursuit of property, and that will eventually make its way into the Bill of Rights in America. So we start seeing these ideas become very, very transformed. And one of the individuals who is responsible for that is this guy who is known as Thomas Hobbes. He was an English scholar, a philosopher, and was interested in the nature of government. He wanted to know the answer to this question: why do we have government? Why do we need it? And I think it's important to understand that Hobbes saw human people as selfish and quick to fight, and were always trying to get what they wanted, that they were willing to step over other people to gain what they needed. And so he believed that before there were governments, that people lived in what was known as a state of nature. And that's something I would encourage you to know, that in a state of nature, everyone has a right to everything. In a state of nature, everyone has a right to everything. In order to get what you want, you're always going to be at war with someone else. And therefore, if you're having somebody take your stuff, then why are you going to make stuff? Why are you going to have stuff? And nobody's going to produce anything. Nobody's going to do crops or art or machines because they're afraid somebody's going to take them away. And so Hobbes is not painting a very good picture of life unless you have some sort of government. So Hobbes comes in and he starts talking about this thing that's known as a social contract. A social contract would be between people and government. Now remember, a contract is an agreement in which both sides agree to something to reach a shared goal. So for Hobbes, he said, listen, people will be willing to give up some rights and some power as long as they are protected. But the social contract also needs to understand that once you hand over power in exchange for protection, you lose the right to overthrow. You can't replace, you can't even question the government. So if you want the government to protect you, if you want the government to provide things for you, then you have to be willing to give up certain rights and certain powers, and you cannot overthrow the government if you don't get what you want. He will write a book. It's called Leviathan, Leviathan. And in this book, he talks about the social contract. And he says, listen, if we're going to stop wars and stop violence, the best thing that we can do is have an absolute monarchy. Someone that can impose order, someone that can demand obedience. That is what we need. Well, then we're introduced to a man whose name is John Locke. Locke, who really wanted to be a minister before he became a doctor, and then realized he didn't want to be a doctor, so he just became this philosopher. He has a different idea. And John Locke will be so influential in American history that really some of his ideas and maybe even some of his words actually show up in our own Constitution and in the Declaration of Independence. Now, here's what's important to understand about John Locke. He believed that everyone is born with a tabula rasa, Tabula-rasa, which means that everyone who is born with a blank slate, a blank page. And during your life, that slate or that page is filled up with things that you experience through your five senses. You will learn different things. You will experience different things because you're exposed to those things. And so the one thing that people have in common is that they're human. And as they grow, they start learning things. This is why I believe that you can't say that someone is born racist, because you're born with this clean slate. You learn about racism. You learn about ageism. You learn about sexism. You see it modeled in society, and it influences you. It is written down on that blank slate. And so that is where we start coming in with this idea of how society models or influences people. Locke also imagined a set of natural rights, and these are rights that everyone has, and they cannot be taken away from you, and these rights are life, liberty, and property. Now you understand what I'm talking about as it relates to the Declaration of Independence. Life, people want to live, and people will fight to survive. Liberty means that people want to be as free as possible to make their own decisions, whether they're good or bad. People want liberty. They want freedom to make those own choices. And then property, people want to own things. They want to survive, such as land, food, tools. And these are rights that aren't given to people. These are rights that are born with people. And it is the government's job to come in and to protect those natural rights. Here's where Locke is different than Hobbes, because Locke says the government's job is to protect life, liberty, and property. And if the government fails, if the government does not succeed in that, then you as a people have the right to overthrow, to rebel, to remove that aspect of government. This is completely different from Hobbes' view. This is the view that finds its way in the Declaration of Independence. This is how America finds evidence in support of how they rebel against Great Britain so that they can have freedom. We break away from England because the government failed to give us life, liberty, and property. We then move into an individual who is known as Voltaire. And when you start looking at the life of Voltaire, very interesting individual. He was famous for writing a lot of poetry, a lot of poems, and sometimes they were not very good. He actually got kicked out of France because he mocked the French family, the royal family. He mocked them in some poems. He could not bite his tongue, and so he would be sent away, and then he would be put in prison. And just one interesting thing about Voltaire, is that Voltaire worked with another guy and actually found a way to the French had this loophole, and he found a way to be able to get through the loophole and win a lottery. So he won a lot of money because he found a way to cheat the system, if you will. And that's how he devotes his life to basically writing. But he was a believer in individual freedoms. As you can see, religious belief, freedom of speech. And he said, I do not agree with the words you say, but I'll defend you to the death that you have the right to say it. Montesquieu is the one who is responsible for giving us checks and balances that we now see in our government today. We have Rousseau who comes in. He was committed to individual freedom. So notice the theme here, individual freedoms, individual freedoms. The government has a responsibility to protect and provide for the individual freedoms. And according to Locke, if that doesn't happen, then you can overthrow. We see Beccaria. He comes in and talks about courts to preserve social order, not avenge crime, as maybe Machiavelli and some of the other guys, Hammurabi's Code of Laws. He kind of gets rid of capital punishment, that it should be abolished. Excuse me. I do want to mention Mary Wollstonecraft, very interesting individual who comes in during this particular time. First of all, she is a female during the Enlightenment thinkers, and she believes that women should be equally educated along with men. She had a very tragic life. She had gotten together with this French writer, and they had a baby whose name was Fanny. And shortly after, he left left Mary and left her pretty much with the baby alone, with no money, no life, pretty much. And she actually would attempt to commit suicide on 2 occasions, but survives. She then does fall in love with another man who is good to her, takes care of her, and they will actually have a child. And one of the children that they will have will be Mary Wollstonecraft Godwin. You probably don't know her in that name, but who you probably do know her of is her name will become Mary Shelley. And Mary Shelley, of course, the writer of Frankenstein. So Mary Wollstonecraft comes in. She writes this book called A Vindication of the Rights of Woman, and she lays the groundwork for women's rights, that women should have the same goals as men. And this would be very, very influential during this time. So what we start to see through the Enlightenment, progress happens. It's more secular, less religion, and it's all about the individual. So I go back to something Mary said, that as she was talking about this idea of women having rights, notice what she credits for the inferior treatment of women. I think that you'll see that the grand source of female folly and vice has ever appeared to me to arise from the narrowness of mind. From the very constitution of civil governments has put almost insuperable obstacles in the way to prevent the cultivation of the female understanding. But yet virtue can be built on no other foundation. The same obstacles are thrown in the way of the rich, and the same consequences ensue. In other words, here's the thing, narrowness of mind. Be open to studying things, being open to acknowledging that life isn't always centered on what you think is right, that there are other people who have different thoughts. And while we might not agree, we must always respect, to go back and say, I might not agree with you, but I do agree that you have the right to say it.